think just to the panel and everyone. So it's like two questions. So the first question is, where do you rank Salah as an overall EPL great? If Liverpool win this Premier League and Salah hits that 20 goals and assists, where would you then rank Salah in the overall EPL greats?
It's a great question.
He's in the top.
No, this is my problem exactly. This is it. I'm one of my biggest problems with Liverpool fans, like those types of pictures in particular. Like you saw Super Chat actually referring to that debate earlier, referring to the Salah and Henry debate. I think my biggest problem with Liverpool fans has been is when they have a great player like this, he has to be the greatest, or that's it. Like Trent is the greatest right back ever. Gerrard's the greatest centre mid ever. Van Dijk's the greatest centre back ever. So they're just gonna force Salah to be the greatest winger.
But but Judge,
he's got to win the Champions League. If he wins the Champions League in the Premier League,
what we're gonna hear.
Then
Henry, if he does that, then we're having a very scarier conversation. If he does both, that's even scarier.
I'm someone that fights for Mo Salah being in the debate, although I've never said I think he is the greatest. Some people think that's what I believe. No, I'm actually at a point where I think we have to start breaking these awards into eras. Partly, but big reason being, I don't mean this disrespectfully to Henry or David or George, because you three gentlemen are probably anywhere between 10 to 15 years younger than the rest of us. You guys didn't watch Ryan Giggs in his pomp, as an example. So for you to have an outright...
glad you added an example, because I thought you was going to try to say something.
No. It was disrespectful. I don't see how somebody of that age can have the debate about Premier League greats or English football greats when you haven't watched. And listen, let's be honest, right? I have seen a bit of content recently from a few big accounts where they start doing debates about players from like the 80s and the early 90s, and they talk about them like they remember watching them. It's like, brother, you were literally in your dad's nutsack, and I don't believe you've sat there and watched 3, 4, 5, 6 seasons worth of footage to have that opinion. You know, watch a documentary and go, wow, I didn't know all these things. That's great. So I believe we have to separate it into eras, and there's a possibility that Henry and Mo actually go into separate eras of the Premier League because of the age thing. What I will say is that Mo Salah, if and when they win this Premier League, if they win multiple trophies with it, you look at his goal return, his GA, he is in that debate and he is a solid candidate. What I would say, if he has a season this year where he wins some more major silverware, if I look at this last, say, 15 years, this kind of the second, breaking the Premier League into 2 15-year eras, give or take a few years, I would say that he comes out as the best attacker in this period. I can't think of another attacker. Some better dribblers, some better technique. Some may have scored more. Some may have won more. But I think when you look at all of those factors, I think most, especially as he's going into his 30s doing it, the consistency of him, he's a really, really big shout. Of this past 15 years, I can't think of another attacker that I could say, yeah, you're right, was better than him overall. I can't think of one.
I'm guessing that you three, as older, your Premier League greats will probably be any of Cantona, Bergkamp, Henry, that sort of ilk. If Salah wins the Champions League this year and the Premier League does a double, knowing the fact that Henry, during the Premier League, never won a European trophy. He left and joined Barcelona. If Salah wins the Champions League and the Premier League this season, would that change anyone's opinions? Is he the greatest?
See, Henry, here's the thing. Like, that's why it's a quality thing. Let me give an example. Because again, I think David, Henry, and you may be too young. There's a guy called David Ginola, who, in my view, I believe that on a technical level, he will always be better than he'll always be better than Salah. Like what Ginola, the stuff that this guy was doing for Tottenham and Newcastle, just in terms just from an aesthetic quality point of view, it's different. But it's a key thing what Henry says, because when we talk about a great, we have to take ability, achievements, and impact. Salah has never had a bad season. Since the first season he came here, he broke the scoring record. He's never had a bad season. So, because again, you have to look at his context. Look at the team he has and look at what he's doing with the team that he has. You see, Terry, I am sort of with you in a sense with the Giggs because of how good he was, his longevity, his consistency. But why I think Salah might have a slight edge is that Giggs, you did have arguably the greatest manager of all time. And that was still a very good team. I'm sorry, no one is repping Cody Rhodes as an attacker. No one is repping Darbibi as well. No one is ranking freaking Curtis Jones. So the fact that Salah is carrying these food sellers.
I don't get the references. I don't even understand the references. Explain them to me. I'm an old man.
Darwizi is Darwin Nunes. Cody Rhodes is Cody Gakpo.
Oh, okay. It's about Liverpool now. So I understand that, but I just want to say, but when you say like, okay, but Giggs played for the greatest manager of all time, at least we've just, again, this established that we all agree that Fergie's the GOAT still, which is great. The problem with that is that he also is up with the manager and the team that has the higher standards then. So therefore, if your standards drop below a certain level for too long, you're gone. So to maintain yourself under the greatest manager of all time, as you've called him, first team for 20 years, to start off as a left-sided marauding winger and to eventually move into a holding midfield player where you were bossing midfield at 40 years old and winning Premier Leagues, that's why I think discrediting him for being in a great team with a great manager is actually crazy, because the standard to be able to perform and stay under that leadership is crazy.
No, but
if Pop had those standards and Liverpool had those standards, they wouldn't have kept Jordan Henderson for 2 or 3 more years than they should have done. So for me, I'm not going to discredit Ryan Giggs because Fergie was a better manager than Klopp.
No, that's fair. Huge high standards, and you had to maintain their high standards for Fergie, specifically once United started going. But my rebuttal to that is, how reliant is this Liverpool team on Salah to get wins? How reliant was that Man United team on Giggs to get wins? Because you still had a Kanchelskis, you had a Poboski, you had a Bex, you had all those other guys.
That question comes up all the time. Do you know what I would say to that as well? This is where the era thing's important. We weren't doing this 20 years ago. In terms of fans, you and your mate to talk at school, but it was banter. You talk for a little bit of time at work, but no bunches and bunches of men and women with hundreds of thousands, if not millions of viewers per week, but not sitting down, discussing and breaking down every game, previewing every game, discussing. I think if we went back and spoke about all those seasons, you know, the Jose era at Chelsea, the Wenger era at Arsenal, Fergie's era, I think we'd have been talking about these players very differently. The idea that Man United didn't rely on Ryan Giggs is, for me, fundamentally untrue. He had a period in his 20 years at the club in the early noughties where he had some really bad hamstring problems. He was injured a bit and he just wasn't performing in games. A lot of that actually came from him driving sports cars that were low to the ground. They didn't agree with him, and he started doing yoga, started driving the bigger cars like the Range Rovers and fixed his hamstrings. In that period where Giggs had a wobble in his career, Man United also had a wobble and didn't win the league title for a few years. He was so influential to how we played. The problem is there's just no evidence in terms of content of football fans talking about his importance. And what rivals are never going to do, because if they don't want Giggs to win the debate or Rooney, is they're not going to go back and look at the thousands of articles that were written about this man and his influence at Man United for that period. Because why would you go and do that research? It's just easy to say, well, I don't remember anybody saying he was influential. Well, that's because, one, some of you are about 5 years old, and two, there wasn't a platform to have these conversations. So the advantage Mo Salah has, the advantage Eden Hazard has, and they're both brilliant players, not slagging them off in any capacity, is that content is being made about them, and we're remembering these conversations because they're essentially, if someone deletes the videos, they're kind of immortalized in that way. But I know and I remember, and you can tell the players that were influential. And one of the biggest key points is, and you'll remember this, who are the names being shouted by the kids in the playground when they shot at a shot on goal or they dribble? And I don't have kids still do this when they play football because I don't watch them play other than my own son. And he's only 4, he doesn't really get it yet. But when I was a kid, Giggs' name, Beckham's name, Cantona's name, when you took shots, when you crossed the ball, when you did a skill, those are the names that the kids were shouting out. That tells me Henri had it. Kids started wearing gloves in the summer to play football. Why? Because of Henri, right? Shearer. Like all these things. The amount of times young kids would, especially if they blast the ball from about 18 yards and in the top corner, the word, even if they didn't support Newcastle, the word Shearer, you'd hear it around a playground all the time. So for me, that is enough evidence to suggest that these players were massively influential for their teams because they had the same... The way the fans loved them back then and idolized them is the same way that Salah gets it now, the same way that Palmer gets it now, because they are the talisman and they are integral. So I do get your point, and that's why I feel like there has to be almost like an era split when it comes to these conversations, because otherwise you'll never come to a kind of consensus, you know? And
but I just think like the point that Henry is making is if with what Salah is, again, I know context and everything, but with how Salah is playing, how influential he is, if he does that two flex of I am key to a Premier League win and I'm key to a Champions League win.
Yeah, I get that.
I'm looking at the past, I'm like, how many individuals have been pivotal in a league win and a UCL win in the same season?
Yeah, only a handful of players. Again, sorry, David. There'll only be 4 teams that you could ever pick those players from. Man United's 99 squad, okay. Man United's 2008 team, the treble-winning City team, and this Liverpool team if they do it. There's only 4 teams that you could ever take that example from. By the way, Giggs was in 2 of those teams. In fact, Giggs, to say that Giggs wasn't influential, Giggs actually had one of his lowest GA seasons in the 98-99 season. But if you
is he your Premier League GOAT?
Giggs, yeah, I think the reason why Giggs has never been crowned it since he retired is because of all of the stuff with his brother's wife. You know, he's had a lot of he's had a lot of, I wouldn't call it, he's had a lot of bad press and they've done a lot of bad things off the pitch, which again, when it comes to any kind of award, personal awards, so much of it is connected to how this looks. There's a reason that I don't know if he has done now, but he hasn't even been inducted into the Premier League Hall of Fame. There's a reason for that. But if we're a moment, we can just be sensible and separate the adulterer from the football player. He's up there. But for me, probably still, if I'm being honest, I have Eric Cantona a lot higher than other people have him. And Henri said something about him the other day, how it was Cantona that made other foreign players believe they could come to England and play. They didn't ever fancy it as much. There wasn't as many that thought I could go there and really apply my trade because the football was different, the weather, the culture, the food. And, you know, what Cantona did in the 5-6 seasons, Cantona kind of had The Office, the UK Office, there was 2 seasons of it and then it left. And ever since, everyone's wanted a return, but it's never going to come back, but it leaves you wanting more. Cantona did that. He came in, he had 5 great seasons, right? Kicked racism out of football and then just left. And now I look back and I'm like, I wish you had 3 or 4 more because you could have scored more, won more, and that would maybe help you in these conversations. But there's something sort of amazing about that. Cantona's right up there for me. Henri, of course, is in that. I wouldn't ever discredit Henri. Henri was a maverick. I saw someone earlier wrote a super chat, and I want to defend Henri for a minute here, not because I'm an Arsenal fan, but because it's fair. But he said,
is Dennis Bergkamp in the conversation?
Bergkamp's in it. Of course he is.
Oh, yeah, no. He's one of the best players I've ever seen.
Bergkamp's there. You've got Bergkamp in it.
That's the problem.
Yeah, no, honestly,
he got player goal of the month, didn't he?
But Dennis Bergkamp, Dennis Bergkamp, not prolific goal scorer, good creator. He was so amazing. He was so amazing.
On a different level.
But by the way, there's a player that's not even in. There's a player that's not on anybody's. I love players like him. My favorite player, barring David Beckham, though, in that sort of 90s era, when he was at Tottenham, I loved him. And then when he moved to Man United, I was over the moon with Teddy Sheringham. He wasn't as good as Bergkamp. Bergkamp was better, but I love that sort of. Though I don't even know if those players could exist in the modern day game because of the speed and power you need to play football now. That's the beauty of them, because I don't know if they could even play today. In the sense of, I can't imagine Bergkamp and Teddy being able to lead a press. I can't imagine it. To be fair, but those two.